On a quiet Saturday evening in April 1960, in the small, deeply religious town of McAllen, Texas, a 25-year-old woman named Irene Garza had dressed in her finest clothes and made her way to Sacred Heart Church. It was Holy Saturday, the night before Easter Sunday, a time of solemn reflection and spiritual renewal. Irene, a beloved schoolteacher and former beauty queen, was headed to confession, a sacred tradition for many Catholics before Easter. She told her parents she wouldn't be long, but Irene would never come home. What began as a peaceful act of faith turned into a nightmare that would leave a community shaken and a family shattered. In the heart of a church, a place meant to offer sanctuary and safety, a horrifying crime occurred, one that would go unsolved for more than 50 years. Beneath the surface of religious devotion and institutional power, dark secrets festered. Suspicions pointed to a priest, Father John Fight, but for decades, justice was delayed, obstructed by silence, fear, and the immense power of the church. This is not just a story about a murder. It is a story about faith betrayed, power abused, and a family's relentless quest for truth. This is the story of Irene Garza, a woman whose death demanded answers, and whose memory refused to be buried. Irene Garza was born on November 15, 1934 in McAllen, Texas, to a close-knit Mexican-American family. Raised in a modest household, Irene grew up with strong moral values, a deep Catholic faith, and a strong sense of community. Her parents, Nicholas and Josefina Garza, instilled in her the importance of education, respect, and service to others. From an early age, Irene displayed remarkable intelligence and a kind spirit that made her beloved by friends, neighbors, and teachers alike. Despite the racial and social barriers of the time, Irene excelled academically. She graduated as a valedictorian from McAllen High School and went on to become the first Mexican-American woman from her town to attend college. She enrolled at Pan American College, where she majored in education. Her academic achievements were matched by her grace and poise. She was crowned Miss All-South Texas Sweetheart in 1958, a title that reflected her beauty, charisma, and popularity. Irene's faith was central to her life. She was a devout Catholic who regularly attended Mass and actively participated in church functions. Her friends often described her as someone who radiated kindness and sincerity. She volunteered at her church and taught catechism to young children. Her devotion to her faith wasn't just ritual, it was part of her identity. By 1960, Irene was working as a second-grade teacher at Thigpen Elementary School. She was passionate about teaching and deeply committed to her students. Outside the classroom, she remained close to her family and was known for her gentle nature and quiet strength. Irene was a young woman with dreams of marriage, a family, and a meaningful life built on faith and compassion. She had recently confided in friends about feeling unsure of herself, battling inner struggles and seeking peace through prayer and confession. Holy Saturday was a particularly important day for her, a moment of spiritual renewal. That evening, she dressed carefully, told her parents she was heading to Sacred Heart Church for confession, and walked out the door. It was the last time they ever saw her alive. April 16, 1960, was supposed to be an evening of reflection and renewal. For Irene Garza, it began with a simple, heartfelt desire to confess her sins and prepare her soul for Easter Sunday. She left home around 7 p.m., dressed in a white blouse and a pale pink skirt, with her black handbag and rosary in hand. Sacred Heart Church, where she was headed, was only a short walk from her house. She promised her parents she wouldn't be long. But when midnight passed and Irene still hadn't returned, anxiety set in. Her parents, deeply worried, contacted relatives and friends, hoping someone had seen her. No one had. By Sunday morning, it was clear something was wrong. Irene never missed Easter Mass, and she was nowhere to be found. Her parents contacted the police, and an official missing persons report was filed. The search began immediately. Local authorities, volunteers, and members of the church community canvassed the area. Flyers were distributed, Irene's image, radiant and smiling, was everywhere. Her disappearance made front-page news across Texas. But the early days brought only more fear and confusion. 2 days later, Irene's black handbag was found near a canal. Her high-heeled shoe was discovered not far from it. A few feet away, police found a slide viewer, a small device used for viewing photo slides. It didn't belong to Irene. Investigators later linked it to Father John Fite, one of the priests who had heard confessions at Sacred Heart Church that night. By April 21st, 5 days after she vanished, the worst fears were confirmed. Irene's body was found in a canal near an isolated stretch of road. She was floating face down in the water. An autopsy revealed she had been raped, beaten, and suffocated. Her eyes were bruised, and her blouse had been torn. The brutality of the murder stunned the entire community. It wasn't just the loss of a beloved teacher, it was the desecration of innocence within a sacred space. McAllen, a town deeply rooted in Catholic tradition, struggled to comprehend what had happened. The church that had always been a symbol of safety now stood at the center of suspicion. Who could have committed such an act? Why was she targeted? And would her killer ever be found? As mourning gripped the community, the investigation turned toward the very place Irene had last been seen alive, the confessional booth inside Sacred Heart Church. But what they wouldn't cover in the coming weeks would raise disturbing questions, not just about one man, but about a system that had failed to protect Irene and would continue to fail her for decades to come. As investigators pieced together Irene Garza's final movements, all signs pointed back to Sacred Heart Church and to one man in particular, Father John Bernard Fite, a visiting priest from a nearby monastery. Fite had been assisting with confessions that evening due to the large turnout expected before Easter. He was one of the last people known to have seen Irene alive. At first glance, Fite seemed like an unlikely suspect. Young and articulate, with a calm demeanor and a strong reputation within Catholic circles, he was well regarded by churchgoers and clergy alike. But beneath that polished surface lay disturbing signs. Just 3 weeks prior to Irene's murder, Fite had been arrested for an attempted rape in a nearby town. The victim, a young woman at another church, had fought him off after being attacked in the sacristy. That case was still pending when Irene disappeared. Investigators began to wonder, could this be the same man who had taken Irene's life? Detectives brought Fite in for questioning. His story was vague and filled with inconsistencies. He admitted to hearing confessions the night Irene disappeared, but claimed he had never seen her. He also mentioned having scratches on his hands, which he attributed to an accident with barbed wire. Suspicion mounted when lab results confirmed that a slide viewer found near Irene's belongings was indeed Fite's. Despite this evidence, Fite was not charged. The church intervened, calling the accusations unfounded and vouching for Fite's character. Behind the scenes, powerful Catholic leaders pressured investigators to tread lightly. Fearing scandal and reputational damage, Fite was quietly moved to another parish. Meanwhile, Irene's family was left devastated. Her parents, Nichols and Josefina, remained convinced that the church knew more than it was revealing. Community members began to whisper about covers and a lack of accountability. Yet still no arrest came. The case soon went cold. Fite left Texas and joined a religious order in Missouri. For years, he continued his work in the church, preaching sermons and guiding parishioners, his past a silent shadow. But for those who loved Irene Garza, silence was not an option. Her family continued to push for answers, and decades later, the truth would resurface, propelled by those who refused to let justice be buried alongside Irene. For decades, Irene Garza's murder case languished, frozen by fear, institutional silence, and the passage of time. Her parents passed away without ever seeing justice. But Irene's cousins, childhood friends, and a few determined, longed and refused to give up. As the years rolled on, whispers about Father Fite never truly faded. In the early 2000s, a renewed effort began. A new wave of public awareness around historical abuses within the Catholic Church began to break down barriers of silence. Detectives and prosecutors revisited cold cases, and Irene's was among them. Former District Attorney Irene Garza re-examined the evidence and spoke to aging witnesses who still remembered the trauma of that spring night in 1960. One of the most compelling breakthroughs came from two former clergy members who claimed that Veit had privately confessed to killing Irene. One former monk revealed that Veit told him the murder was a mistake and that he believed God had forgiven him. Another described a pattern of erratic and disturbing behavior by Veit throughout his ministry. After years of resistance, in 2016, over half a century after Irene Garza's death, Father John Veit was finally arrested and charged with her murder. The trial, held in 2017, brought the community back to the trauma of the past. Witnesses, some in their 70s and 80s, took the stand to share what they had kept inside for so long. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of a man who had abused his position, a church that had shielded him, and a system that had failed. On December 8, 2017, Father John Veit was found guilty of the murder of Irene Garza and sentenced to life in prison. He died less than 2 years later, in February 2020, behind bars. It took 57 years, generations of grief, and countless prayers, but finally, Irene's family received the justice they had long been denied. Her memory lives on, not only in sorrow but in strength. Her story stands as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the importance of accountability, and the enduring hope that truth will prevail even when it takes a lifetime. Irene Garza's story is more than just a tragedy. It is a reflection of the complex intersection between faith, justice, and institutional power. Her case exposed deep flaws in how religious organizations and the justice system handle accusations against powerful figures. For decades, fear of scandal and misplaced loyalty to the church allowed a suspected killer to live freely, protected by the very institution meant to uphold moral integrity. Her story became a rallying point for advocates of justice reform and victims of clergy abuse. It reminded the public that no person, regardless of their position, should be above the law, and no institution should shield wrongdoers from accountability. Irene's name now stands alongside those of other victims whose voices were silenced but later heard through perseverance and truth. In schools, courtrooms, and churches, her case has been studied and discussed. It has inspired books, documentaries, and policy conversations. Organizations advocating for survivors of sexual abuse have cited her case as an example of why transparency and vigilance are crucial. For her family and the McAllen community, Irene remains a symbol of grace and strength. Though her life was cut short, her legacy endures. Every confession made in trust, every act of faith offered in sincerity, now carries her memory. In the end, Irene Garza's story is not only about the pursuit of justice, it is about never giving up. It is about the courage to speak, the pain of silence, and the hope that, with enough determination, truth will always find a way to the light. If you were moved by Irene Garza's story, we urge you to share this documentary. Speak out for the voiceless. Stand up for justice. And remember, Irene's story reminds us that even in the darkest silence, truth will echo. Subscribe for more true crime stories that demand to be heard.